and welcome. Breaking news edition today on i24 News. I'm Sarah Shalala. Stay tuned now. Well, Israel's new election date has been set. November the 1st is when Israeli citizens will head to the polls to vote for their new government. Well, at this hour, Israeli parliament members are voting on the final readings of the bill to dissolve parliament after postponements yesterday. A little after 9 this morning, we heard from opposition leader Benjamin Netanyahu giving his speech from the Knesset ahead of the dissolution of parliament. Let's take a quick listen now to opposition leader Benjamin Netanyahu. He spoke earlier at the Knesset ahead of the dissolution of Israeli parliament.
First thing is to reduce prices, then to bring back national pride. Third thing is Iran. If Iran develops a nuclear arsenal, it will threaten our existence. Therefore, me and my friends will do everything so that Iran does not acquire a nuclear weapon. We will fight the Iranian aggression and its proxies, both on the international level and in the operational level. These are the three destinations: reducing the cost of living, the national pride, and the Iranian threats. Together with them, many other initiatives. But in order to do all of this, and many other things, Israel needs a strong government, experienced and stable government. We just cannot execute these things and continue to bring Israel on the fantastic path that we have over the past decade. We cannot do this when the government is led by rookies without experience, with no vision.
Well, all right, now let's cross straight to Jerusalem, straight to the Knesset, where our very own senior correspondent Owen Alterman joins us there. Owen, good to have you with us there again. You've been covering the lead up to this day, obviously, for a couple of days. We expected the dissolution of the Knesset to happen last night. That didn't go to plan. What's expected with that right now on your side? What are you seeing?
Right. Well, as we speak, Sarah, the Knesset is going through the various amendments to the bills, expecting soon to have those votes in the second and third readings for the parliament to dissolve. With us very quickly, we have Likud member of parliament, Miki Zohar. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
So we just heard from the leader of your party, opposition leader Benjamin Netanyahu, give a speech. Obviously a well-crafted speech, as we've come to expect from Netanyahu, with lots of energy. We see that in him. On the other hand, maybe a bit of a backward-looking speech, right? Looking back to what was, having a sense of nostalgia. Does the Likud have a forward-looking message going into this election campaign?
I think it's important to look back all the time. It will help you to control your future. So I think that Benjamin Netanyahu said wonderful things today in his speech, and as you see, he's in a good form, in a good shape, and he's waiting for the election. We're happy that we are going to this direction, and hopefully very, very soon we're going to be inside of the election. As you know, we are a Likud party with the democratic voters that going to come and vote in the primary in our party. It's supposed to be very, very soon, maybe in 1 month from now, so we are ready also for that. Yes, Israel is going for an election. Hopefully, we're going to win it.
Of course, we heard in that speech again, the former prime minister criticizing the Arab parties, Ram, associating them with the Muslim Brotherhood, and also the Joint Arab List. There's, of course, criticism all the time that Netanyahu is going too far in what he says about the Arab parties. What do you say to that criticism? And are there red lines beyond which he will not go, and Likud will not go in its rhetoric?
We cannot form a government with the Islamic radical organization and with Ram function in the Knesset. We cannot do that. And as we saw, this government did that, and we pay a big price. Israel paid a big price because this country is a Jewish and a democratic country, and we need to remember that. And unfortunately, these parties like the Joint List and the Ram Party don't believe in this idea. We can do everything we did until now to help the Arabs to live in Israel and prosper, but we cannot allow that the Arabs will control this country. This country is a Jewish and democratic country, and we're going to keep it that way. The minority of the Arabs will get their rights, but we cannot let Ram and the radical Islamic organization control this country. It cannot happen again.
And maybe one last question, because I know you're in a hurry. Okay, so we'll have to let you go.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Obviously, Mickey Zohar, like everyone, very busy. Sarah, on this day, he has to get to a vote. He's doing another interview with an Israeli channel. Obviously, bring you more from members of parliament as we're able to catch them here in the parliament. Again, those votes expected shortly, second and third readings in the bill to dissolve the Israeli parliament.
Of course, Owen Alterman there. Thank you so much for that fabulous reporting and for letting us hear from this member as well. Our senior correspondent there from the Knesset all the way from Jerusalem. Thank you so much as always. Well, in the studio now with me, Amir Oren, defence and government commentator, is here to also bring us a little bit more insight about what's going on this big day in politics. Firstly, thank you so much for coming on to the show and joining this big conversation in Israeli politics. So let's firstly start with Bennett's speech yesterday. So let's just rewind a few steps back. He made it really clear yesterday that he's not just stepping down from office, but completely stepping down from politics. So before we really get stuck into the conversation, you and I, let's just cross to one of the snippets from that speech. Let's take a listen to it.
Beloved people of Israel, in a short time I will conclude my position as the Prime Minister of Israel, and I will transfer the helmet to my friend Yair Lapid. I will continue to assist as an alternate Prime Minister for as long as needed. His success is the success of our country. The transition of positions will be professional, with the good of Israel in my eyes. I wish to update you that I do not intend to run in the next elections, but I will remain a loyal soldier of this country, which I served all my life as an officer, as a minister, and as your Prime Minister. The state of Israel is the love of my life. To serve the country is my destiny.
Okay, crossing back to Amir here in studio with me. So obviously you just heard from Bennett there, and he's got a lot of pride about all his achievements in the past year and with this leadership. So it's been a very unusual year though in leadership. What's in store for Bennett, do you think, moving forward after this?
So Bennett did not resign from the Knesset, as, for instance, Netanyahu did when he lost to Ehud Barak in 1999, or Shamir before him. He's obviously going to stay in the wings, perhaps in the elections after the coming elections, because we had 4 already prior to this one. He may be back if there is some demand for him. Right now, he's not in a good shape. He doesn't have a lot to show for it, even though the newspaper columnists liked him and are giving him some rave reviews. But nevertheless, politically, he failed to hold on to his own party and to the coalition. He is trying to now sound as if he's above politics, but in the next 4 months, we will see whether this will hold water.
And also with Owen Alterman, our senior correspondent at the Knesset, as you just heard earlier, he's saying that we're still waiting on the vote to dissolve Parliament, although the election date has already been set for November the 1st. So what's the significance of this date particularly? Because they had been tossing up quite a few times between the opposition and coalition about an October date, the 25th perhaps, but now they've set it finally for the 1st.
Well, you know, it's marginal. It's what is called inside baseball. It's not really important for the voter whether it's October the 25th or November the 1st. Now, Likud members yesterday said that they don't like the November date because it's so close to the Rabin Memorial date, which is November 6th. This year, and this will bring memories of Rabin and perhaps drive out the vote, bring out the vote on the center-left side, and make some of their own supporters ashamed to vote for them. But this is not a serious argument.
Thank you so much. Amir Oren there, defence and government commentator, speaking to i24 News. Well, actually, let's continue the conversation a little bit more We will come back to you after the break. Amir, thank you so much for staying with us for now. All right, we're ducking out for a short break now. We'll have more on the latest political developments when we do come back after the break on Israel's political arena. Stay with us.
The Middle East. I24 News is a witness. Our journalists live and breathe there every day. Get all the latest global news from our studios in Tel Aviv, New York, Washington, and Paris. Anytime, anywhere. Download the i24 News app, available on Roku, Amazon Fire, Apple, and Google stores. I24 News, see beyond.
Hello and welcome. Thanks for staying with us on this big day in politics, Israeli politics here. Well, in the studio with me now, we're crossing back to Amir Oren. We were chatting to him a little bit earlier before the break. He's a defense and government commentator. So, Amir, we'll just resume our conversation now about Israeli politics. So we heard earlier on this morning, a little bit after 9, opposition leader Benjamin Netanyahu was in the Knesset giving his speech, but he had a lot to criticize the current coalition on, and obviously much to say about what his plans will be if he does get re-elected in November. So his top 3 initiatives, I'll just quickly relay them to you: the Iranian threat, national pride, and also reducing costs here in Israel. So he says Israel cannot be ruled by rookies, which is what he's described the current the current coalition to be, or the Muslim Brotherhood. They cannot be ruled by any of those. But the latter comment regarding the Muslim Brotherhood caused a major uproar as well in the Knesset. I don't know if you saw that.
So, a couple of comments. First of all, in 1996, Netanyahu was a rookie running against the much experienced Shimon Peres. He didn't think at that time that this is supposed to be a major impediment to himself. Now, his real agenda is against the judiciary system, the Supreme Court, the Attorney General's office, the police, because of his own personal predicament. And if he's elected prime minister, of course, in Knesset, he is not being directly elected by the people. He's going to try to, what he calls to reform, others may call deform the entire system of justice. Regarding Iran, what he said was a bit ironic, because he said that Iran has been galloping towards a bomb. Yes, it is galloping because he has whipped up the horse by trying with President Trump to revoke the Iran nuclear deal of 2015. And the upshot was that Iran is now closer to the bomb. As for the Islamic movement, the United Arab Party, he is in a spat with Mansour Abbas, the leader of this party, regarding what happened the last time around. Apparently, he has now broken with Abbas completely, but if he needs him for his political survival, he will probably find a formula, and Abbas will be willing, and let bygones be bygones.
It's very intriguing, and there's still so much to keep track of because there's so much unfolding here in this. So let's stay with us now for a little bit, Amir, because we have to cross straight back to the Knesset, where our senior correspondent, Owen Alterman, there is standing by for us in Jerusalem. So, Owen, we understand that you've got more updates there at the Knesset. Please fill us in with the latest.
Yeah, there, Sarah, the vote is happening. That's the main update. The third reading of the vote of the bill to dissolve the parliament is happening as we speak. This is the big vote. This is the vote that is the final vote that will dissolve the parliament, after which we should say they are still going to try to go through and pass some other pieces of legislation that have been agreed upon between the coalition and the opposition. So there is still some more parliamentary work to be done over the course of the day. But this is the vote. This is the vote that's going to determine that Israel heading yet again to another set of elections, November 1st, that date now final, and that this parliament, set like so many of its predecessors over the past few years, Sarah, set to dissolve, sending Israel to its fifth set of elections in just over 3 years, and at the stroke of midnight local time tonight, set to make Yair Lapid the next prime minister of Israel.
I mean, so the reality, obviously, is that we are going into these fifth elections in under 4 years, Owen, but how likely are we to see a different outcome than the previous few times that we've gone to elections?
You know, we always ask that question, and so far we haven't had a different outcome, at least not a materially different outcome. Obviously, we had a constellation that came together to form a very different kind of government this time. The polls are pointing toward much of the same. That has to be said as we start this election campaign. But, Sarah, there are a lot of X factors here. There are a lot of small parties that currently are running on their own that are close to the threshold of whether they get into the parliament or don't. There are going to be so many mergers. There are going to be parties that come together. There are going to be parties that break apart. So we still have to, I think we have to wait and see what exactly the constellation of parties is that's going to run till we stand on firmer ground in terms of making predictions. One thing that did come out of a poll last night that was run in the wake of Naftali Bennett deciding he's leaving politics is that he handed over the reins of his party to Ayelet Shaked, the reins of the Yamina party, and the party's still polling at its 5-6 seats in the polls. Now, Shaked is seen as much more likely to go into a Netanyahu government than was Naftali Bennett. So if she is able, over the next 4 months, to hold on to those 5 or 6 seats and bring them with her, and of course the rest of the political map is arranged similar to the way it is today, that would seem to give Netanyahu an advantage. But again, there are so many other factors out there. I think we have to wait for the dust to settle in terms of exactly which parties are running in what constellations till we have a sense of where this is headed. In terms of what the elections are going to be about, I think it's an open question, oddly, about whether it will be another yes Bibi, no Bibi election, whether it will be another referendum on Netanyahu, or whether we'll be looking at more of the substance of the issues. Netanyahu himself, by the way, seems to be pushing in that direction. We've obviously talked about his speech over the course of the last hour or two. So we will see. Maybe this will be an election that's about issues and about political orientation more than it is about his personality, or maybe not. He still is a personality that evokes very, very strong reactions, both among his supporters and his opponents. So it may well be true that those two very hardened camps in terms of their views on the former Israeli prime minister, that they're going to continue to hold sway, and that will continue to dominate the upcoming election cycle.
Absolutely, and we'll be coming straight back to you when those developments unfold. Owen, thank you so much. Owen, our senior correspondent from the Knesset in Jerusalem, they're bringing us the very latest. Well, let's cross back to the studio now. Amir Oren, our guest, is still with me here, defense and government commentator speaking to i24 News. So as you heard there, Amir, Owen is saying that the final reading, they're up to that stage already, and it's likely to happen in the next coming hours. What do you think the polls are showing us already now ahead of the elections on November the 1st? Is Netanyahu and his party likely to win a 6th term, perhaps?
So you're saying Netanyahu and his party, they are not one and the same. Because if this time around Netanyahu is not able to form a government, there may be finally a revolt within Likud, because obviously with the electorate moving to the right, Likud will be able to form a government if any other leader would have been Likud's candidate for the prime ministership. It's personal animosity against Netanyahu and the fact that the corruption trial is still undergoing and will be still around television screens when the elections are held. So the Netanyahu personal factor is weighing very heavily. Also, the Bennett premiership was the first time in Israeli history when someone not from a major party, from one of the 2 or 3 major parties throughout Israeli history, has become prime minister, because up until that time, a small party could be the kingmaker, never the king. And Ayelet Shaked may want to be the queen rather than the kingmaker, because if Netanyahu needs her, let's say, 4 or 5 seats in the Knesset to become alternate prime minister. He won't be the prime minister. But in order for himself to become the alternate prime minister, he will gladly give her the prime ministership. It doesn't mean that his party will automatically support it. But this is the scenario that one can see unfolding.
And what about Yair Lapid? Does he have the ability to fill these big shoes as prime minister going forward as well?
Whose big shoes? Bennett's or Netanyahu's? Netanyahu has worn his shoes for 15 years, 12 of them running. They are very worn shoes and quite torn too. And Lapid, up to now, has been an astounding political success. On the policy side, nothing yet to show, including his 2 short tours as finance minister and foreign minister. But we know from around the world, Gorbachev, de Klerk in South Africa, and Sadat in Egypt, people sometimes surprise us. So because expectations are low, Lapid can only get better results than expected.
But do you think that the Israeli public has faith in Lapid?
Right now, we see that because he's going to enter office, his polling will immediately shoot up, because this is the reality. At first, you don't believe that this is possible. When it happens, it's inevitable. Of course, he's the prime minister. And yes, it depends on his campaign, whether he shows a good team as his prospective ministers for the next time around. And as Owen Alterman said, what happens on the margins, mergers, for instance, between Labour and Meretz, will Lieberman and Saar run each on his own, or whether they will have at least what is called a technical bloc, which will enable them to split after the elections. These are still question marks. We will have the Biden trip, and there is always the chance, the possibility of some defense, security, military crisis. If he manages one of those, it will bring his chances to at least to Netanyahu's level.
And what do you think the transfer of power is going to be like from Bennett to Lapid?
It's not a lot of power. Bennett was not a sole ruler anyway. He was the number 1 on the protocol list, but he had to take care of his co-equal ministers like Benny Gantz at defense and Lieberman at finance. So it was more symbolic. We have not heard of any particular decision made by Bennett as the ultimate arbiter. And Lapid, too, will have to consider all of his partners. 4 months, a political campaign, not a lot of time to deal with the country's concerns.
And I asked you a little bit earlier on about the Israeli public's faith in Lapid taking over this role. But what about if the tables were turned and it was actually going to be Netanyahu winning the election? With his criminal record and that history, is the Israeli public ready to welcome him back into power for a 6th term?
Well, the Israeli public is obviously split. Approximately half would vehemently object to Netanyahu's coming back, as long as he is on trial and maybe convicted and even sent to jail. And the other half sees him as almost a messiah. Yes, there is the making of a civil war, at least in public discourse, if Netanyahu manages to get 61 seats in the next Knesset.
Thank you so much, Amir. We're going to cross straight back to our correspondent, Owen Alterman, who's at Parliament in the Knesset. Owen, tell us what's the latest. We're crossing back to you now. We got that update earlier on about that final reading, but what's unfolding right now?
Yeah, what's unfolding right now, Sarah, is that the Israeli parliament is dissolving. The vote finishing up, the parliament deciding it is going to dissolve itself. Obviously, that's what we had been expecting through all the twists and turns of this process over the course of the last week.
Thank you so much. Owen Alterman, our correspondent there. Owen, so what else are we expected to find out moving forward now with Yair Lapid becoming Prime Minister?
Well, he becomes Prime Minister, Sarah, at the stroke of midnight local time tonight. So in just about 13 hours from now, will take his place as Israel's Prime Minister. Israel's first center-left Prime Minister. Depending on your count it, Sarah, since 2009, maybe even since 2001. So obviously, I don't think that element has gotten, frankly, enough attention that we are having for the first time in a very, very long time a prime minister, albeit an interim prime minister, potentially a caretaker prime minister, potentially only in office for 4 or 5 months, and yet still a prime minister from the center-left camp who represents a very, very different set of constituents than the prime ministers of the recent past.
Thank you so much, our senior correspondent there, Owen Alterman, joining us from the Knesset in Jerusalem. Thank you for all those updates. And to my guest in the studio as well. Well, just to wrap up, the Knesset has officially dissolved on this day. It's a big day in Israeli politics. Stay tuned for more details. The election day has already been set as well for November the 1st. Stay tuned. I'm Sarah Shalala, and thank you for joining us on this day.